The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three ancient star systems, a massive ring of metal and crystal that could hold millions of beings at once. Today, only the 12 elder species sat in their high seats, looking down at the small platform in the center where two humans stood alone. Park had prepared for this moment her entire life. She was 42 years old, and she had spent 30 of those years studying alien languages, customs, and politics. She had read every report from humanity's first contact missions. She had memorized the histories of all 12 council species. She knew their fears, their hopes, and their prejudices. But knowing something and feeling it were very different things. The weight of 1 trillion alien eyes pressed down on her as she stepped forward. Beside her, Captain stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a military man, uncomfortable in diplomatic settings, but had insisted he come. She wanted the council to see that humanity had both soft power and hard power. High Chancellor Mora rose from his seat at the top of the chamber. He was a being made of living crystal, nearly 3 meters tall, and light bent strangely around his body. His species, the Prism Collective, had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. To him, humanity was barely worth noticing. "You are the representatives of the species called human," Mora said. His voice did not come from a mouth. It resonated from his entire crystalline form, translated into human language by the devices in its ears. "You come before this council seeking recognition and membership. State your case." Bowed her head slightly in respect. "Thank you, High Chancellor. I am Ambassador Park of the United Earth Government. Beside me is Captain of the Earth Defense Fleet." She took a breath. Humanity discovered faster-than-light travel 93 years ago. Since then, we have established 17 colony worlds and built a fleet of 287 vessels. We come before this council not as beggars but as potential partners. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took a moment to recognize it as laughter, expressed in a dozen alien ways. Clicking sounds from the eth, deep humming from the gas giant dwelling, sharp whistles from the aquatic. Representative of the hegemony leaned forward. She was a large creature, covered in thick scales, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face. Her species controlled over 800 worlds and commanded the largest military force in the known galaxy. 287 vessels, repeated slowly. I deploy more ships than that to guard a single trade route. Your entire fleet could not conquer one of my minor outposts. She made a sound that might have been amusement. What partnership could you possibly offer us? Captain stirred beside, but she placed a gentle hand on his arm. She had expected this. "We offer fresh perspectives," said calmly. "New ideas, different ways of thinking. The 12 species of this council have known each other for thousands of years. You have settled into patterns. You have stopped innovating because you see no need to innovate. Humanity is young, yes, but youth brings energy, creativity, passion." "Youth brings foolishness," High Chancellor Mora replied. "We have seen young species before. They rise quickly, burn brightly, and destroy themselves within a few centuries. The council exists because the elder species learned patience. We learned wisdom. We learned that the universe does not reward haste." Felt her heart beating faster, but she kept her voice steady. "With respect, High Chancellor, humanity has already survived challenges that destroyed other species. We have records of at least 6 extinction-level events on our asteroid impacts, ice ages, eruptions. Each time we survived, each time we grew stronger." "Survival on a single planet is not impressive," said Delegate of the Prism Collective, supporting his Chancellor. "Any species that achieves sentience must have some survival capability. The true test is surviving in the wider galaxy, among species that are older, stronger, and wiser." Captain could no longer stay silent. "We've survived first contact with 7 different species in the past 90 years, he said, his voice harder than would have liked. 3 of those contacts were hostile. We won all 3 conflicts. The laughter stopped. Now the chamber was very quiet. One, Representative asked carefully. You claim to have won military conflicts with spacefaring species. Which species? The raiders attacked our colony on New 40 years ago, said. We destroyed their fleet and traced them back to their home system. They no longer exist as a spacefaring civilization. 20 years later, the Dominion attempted to enslave our outer colonies. We broke their empire. And 8 years ago, the Machine Collective tried to assimilate Earth itself. We found their central processing hub and detonated a nuclear device inside it. Silence. High Chancellor Mora's crystalline body flickered with strange lights. We are aware of these species. We considered them minor nuisances, not worth our attention. You claim to have defeated them entirely. We don't leave enemies behind us, said simply. For a long moment no one spoke, saw something new in the alien faces around her. It was not respect exactly. It was something more like unease. These ancient beings had dismissed humanity as children, as insects. Now they were beginning to wonder if they had made a mistake. But the moment passed. High Chancellor Mora straightened his crystalline form and spoke in a tone of absolute authority. Your military victories against minor powers are noted, but they do not change the fundamental reality. Humanity is a young species with limited resources and limited experience. The Galactic Council has existed for 40,000 years. We have protocols, standards. Membership requires a species to demonstrate stability over at least 1,000 years of interstellar civilization. He paused. You have not even achieved 100. We are willing to wait for full membership, said quickly. But surely some form of provisional status, observer rights. No, the word echoed through the chamber. The Council has decided humanity is recognition of any kind. You are restricted to your current 17 colony worlds. You may not expand further. You may not engage in trade with Council species. You may not establish diplomatic relations with Council members. Mora's light pulsed coldly. You are quarantined. Felt the words like physical blows. Beside her, hands had clenched into fists. This is not rejection, added, her tone almost kind. It is protection. Young species often destroy themselves when exposed to the wider galaxy too quickly. We are giving you time to mature. In 1,000 years you may petition again. 1,000 years. Thought of her children back on Earth. There. None of them would live to see this wrong made right. She looked up at the High Chancellor, and when she spoke, her voice was very quiet. You may come to regret this decision. Mora's crystalline form flickered with what might have been amusement. That is extremely unlikely, human. The Council has spoken. You are dismissed. As and walked back to their shuttle, the captain finally spoke. That went poorly. Shook her head slowly. No, it went exactly as I expected. They are afraid of us. They hide it behind arrogance, but I saw it in their eyes when you mentioned our victories. They are afraid of what we might become. She looked back at the great hall, shrinking in the distance. And one day they will need us. When that day comes, we will remind them of this moment. Frowned, and if that day never comes? Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It will come. The universe has a way of humbling the arrogant. We just have to be patient and ready. She did not know how right she was, or how soon that day would arrive. 18 months passed after the Council rejected humanity. Life continued. Humans built new ships in secret, hiding their true numbers from Council observers. Scientists developed new weapons that no alien species had ever imagined. And on the edges of known space, Lieutenant sat alone in a small monitoring station, watching the darkness between galaxies. Silent Watch was not a comfortable posting. The station was old, built by the hegemony and later abandoned when they decided the outer rim was not worth defending. Humanity had purchased it cheaply and converted it into an early warning system. If anything came from the Great Void, would see it first. She was 26 years old, born on the colony world of Nu. She had joined the Earth Defense Fleet because she wanted to see the stars, but instead she had spent 3 years staring at empty sensor screens in complete solitude. The nearest human ship was 4 days away at maximum speed. The nearest human colony was 2 weeks away. Had learned to enjoy the silence. She read books. She exercised. She talked to herself just to hear a human voice. And every hour she ran a sensor sweep of the void, knowing she would find nothing. On the night everything changed, she was eating dinner and watching an old movie from Earth when her console began to beep. She ignored it at first, thinking it was just another piece of space debris drifting through her sector. But the beeping grew faster, and faster, and faster still. Set down her food and walked to the console. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. The sensor screen was filled with red dots. Each dot represented a contact, an object large enough to be detected at extreme range. There were hundreds of them, then thousands. Then the number display simply showed a single word: overflow. Her hands shaking activated the long-range imaging system. It took nearly a minute for the picture to form, the light traveling across vast distances to reach her station's receivers. When the image finally appeared, did not scream. She did not cry. She simply stared, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. They looked like living things, massive creatures of flesh and metal and something else, something that hurt to look at directly. They moved through space without engines, propelled by forces that human science could not explain. And there were so many of them. They filled the void like a swarm of insects, blotting out the distant stars. Had studied history, she knew what this was. The Devourers, she whispered. 40,000 years ago, before the Galactic Council existed, a terrible enemy had emerged from the void between galaxies. They were called the Devourer Swarm, and they consumed everything in their path. Stars, planets, entire civilizations. The elder species had been forced to unite against them, setting aside ancient hatreds to fight for survival. The war had lasted 10,000 years. Billions had died. Whole species had been wiped from existence. In the end, the swarm had been driven back into the void. The survivors had formed the Galactic Council, swearing to stand together if the enemy ever returned. That was supposed to be ancient history, a story to frighten children. Nobody truly believed the swarm would return, but was looking at them right now. She activated the emergency communication system and began transmitting. This is Lieutenant of the Earth Defense Fleet stationed at Silent Watch, Priority Alpha Emergency. The Devourer Swarm has returned. Repeat, the Devourer Swarm has returned. Estimated numbers exceed 1 million contacts. They are heading toward Council space. Please respond. Please, someone respond. The message would take hours to reach the nearest receiver, days to reach Earth. By then, the swarm would already be feeding. Sat back in her chair and watched the red dots multiply on her screen. There was nothing else she could do. 3 weeks later, the first Council world fell. It was called Prime of the Aquatic. They had 8 billion citizens and a defense fleet of 2,000 ships. The swarm arrived without warning, emerging from faster-than-light travel directly above the planet. The fleet fought bravely. They destroyed thousands of swarm creatures, but for every creature they killed, 10 more appeared. The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, the fleet was gone. The swarm descended upon the planet and began to feed. They consumed everything: the oceans, the cities, the people. Within 2 days, Prime was a dead rock, stripped of all organic matter. The galaxy watched in horror. High Chancellor Mora called an emergency session of the Council. For the first time in centuries, the Great Hall was filled with panic instead of arrogance. "They have returned," Mora said, his crystalline form dim with fear. "The ancient enemy, the Devourers, our worst nightmare has become reality." Representative of the hegemony stood on shaking legs. "We have already lost 12 worlds. My fleet is engaging the swarm in the outer territories, but we cannot stop them. For every ship we destroy, they learn. They adapt. Weapons that worked yesterday do not work today. The same is true for us, said Delegate. Our energy weapons were effective for the first 3 battles. Now the swarm has developed shielding that absorbs our beams. We are running out of options. One by one, the Council species reported their losses. The Eth had lost their breeding worlds. The had abandoned 3 gas giants. The Machine Collective, ancient enemies of organic life, had sent a message offering alliance against the common threat. That was how desperate things had become. We must unite our fleets, Mora declared. Form a single combined force. Strike at the swarm's heart before they consume us all. And where is the swarm's heart? Demanded. They have no central command. They are a plague spreading in every direction at once. How do you strike the heart of a disease? There was no answer. 6 more weeks passed. 40 more worlds fell. The combined Council fleet fought a desperate battle at the, sacrificing 10,000 ships to drive the swarm back temporarily. But it was not a victory. It was merely a delay. High Chancellor Mora stood before the emergency broadcast system and prepared to send a message to the entire galaxy. His crystalline form was cracked and dim. He had aged 1,000 years in the past 2 months. This is High Chancellor Mora of the Galactic Council, he said. I speak to all species, Council members and non-members alike. We face extinction. The Devourer swarm has returned and we cannot stop them alone. Any species capable of fighting, any civilization with ships and weapons, we beg you to join us. This is not about politics or pride. This is about survival. If we fall, you will be next. Please help us. The message went out to every corner of the galaxy, to species that had been conquered by the Council, to species that had been ignored, to species that had been rejected and quarantined and treated as lesser beings, to humanity. On Earth, Admiral watched the message in the underground command center beneath Sol. Around her stood the leaders of humanity's military and government. They had all seen the reports. They knew what was happening. General Minu was the first to speak. They want our help, after everything they did to us. Yes, said quietly. They rejected us, quarantined us, treated us like animals. Yes. So what do we do? Did not answer immediately. She looked at the frozen image of Mora, the arrogant chancellor who had dismissed humanity as children. He looked so old now, so afraid. We have a choice to make, she finally said. We can stay here behind our defenses and watch the galaxy burn. The swarm will reach us eventually, but we might have years, decades even, time to prepare. Or, Minu asked, turn to face him. Or we can do what the Council never expected, what they never believed we were capable of. We can save them. The room fell silent. They don't deserve our help, someone said. No, agreed. They don't, but this isn't about what they deserve, it's about who we are. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. Humanity has always been at its best when fighting for others, when protecting the weak, when standing against the darkness. If we turn our backs now, we survive, but we lose something more important than our lives. We lose our souls. General Minu stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. How many ships do we have? He asked. Smiled grimly, more than they think. The underground command center beneath Sol was the most secure location on Earth. It had been built in secret over 50 years, carved from solid rock and protected by shields that could withstand nuclear explosions. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Tonight, those people had gathered to decide the fate of humanity. Admiral stood at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the state of the galaxy. Red zones marked swarm-controlled space. It had grown terrifyingly large in just 3 months. Orange zones showed contested areas where Council forces were still fighting, and blue zones, shrinking every day, showed territory that remained free. Show them our true strength, commanded. The display changed. Instead of the galaxy, it now showed Earth's solar system and the ships hidden within it. Thousands of ships, carriers, battleships, destroyers, and cruisers, all built in secret shipyards on the far side of the moon in the asteroid belt in the clouds of Jupiter. General Menu whistled softly. I knew we had been building, but I did not know we had built this many. 3,247 combat vessels, said, plus another 2,000 support ships. The Council thinks we have less than 300. They never bothered to look closely because they did not consider us a threat. Doctor, head of the Advanced Weapons Division, stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent her entire career developing technologies that the Council considered impossible or insane. Ships are only part of the story, said. We have also developed weapons that no other species possesses. The Council species rely on energy weapons, plasma beams, particle cannons. These work well against conventional enemies, but the swarm adapts to energy weapons within hours. She pulled up a new display showing strange devices that looked nothing like normal weapons. We took a different approach. We asked ourselves, what cannot be adapted to? What forces are so fundamental that no biological or technological adaptation can resist them? Gravity, said Captain, who had been promoted twice since the Council meeting. You weaponized gravity. Smiled. Among other things, we have developed gravitational compression bombs that can crush anything to the size of a pinpoint. We have reality that tear holes in the fabric of space itself. We have antimatter cores that can be manually detonated inside enemy formations. She paused. That last one requires volunteer pilots who understand they will not survive. And we have those volunteers, Minu asked quietly. We have more volunteers than ships to carry them, replied. When we announced the program, over 100,000 soldiers applied. We could only accept 12,000. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed what that meant. 12,000 men and women had volunteered to die, to fly their ships directly into the swarm and detonate themselves to protect people who had never shown them any kindness. Ambassador Park spoke for the first time. She had been standing in the corner, watching silently. The Council will not believe we are coming to help them. They will think it is a trick. Probably, agreed. But they will understand soon enough. Once we start destroying swarm creatures by the millions, they will have no choice but to accept our help. And after, asked. After the war is won, assuming we win, what then? Do we demand compensation? Do we take over the Council? What is our price for saving them? It was a good question, and everyone in the room wanted to know the answer. They had all suffered from the Council's arrogance. They all had reasons to want revenge. Considered her words carefully before responding. We will save them because it is the right thing to do. We will ask for nothing except to be treated as equals. If they offer us power, we will refuse it. If they offer us territory, we will refuse it. We are not conquerors. We are not rulers. We are humans. They will think we are fools, Minu said. Let them think what they want. History will remember the truth. The planning took 3 more days. Supply lines were established. Attack formations were designed. Each ship was assigned a specific role in the coming battle. And in secret, the volunteer pilots who would not return said goodbye to their families, recording final messages that would be delivered after the war. Captain Shin was one of those volunteers. She was 34 years old, unmarried, with no children. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to protect people, and now she was going to give her life doing exactly that. Her ship was called the Defiant, a small, fast attack vessel designed to penetrate deep into enemy formations. It carried a single antimatter core that could destroy everything within 100 kilometers. When the time came, would fly directly into a swarm hive cluster and detonate the core. She would not feel any pain. She would simply cease to exist. On the night before the fleet launched, Lieutenant came to see her. had been evacuated from Silent Watch and assigned to one of the human carriers as a sensor operator. She would be watching from a safe distance while people died. "I wanted to thank you," said quietly, "for what you are about to do." Shrugged, "Someone has to do it, might as well be me." "Are you afraid?" Thought about the question for a moment. "Yes, but not of dying. I am afraid of failing. I am afraid that I will hesitate at the last moment and waste my ship's sacrifice. I am afraid that all of this will be for nothing, that the swarm will win anyway, that humanity will be forgotten." Reached out and took her hand. "You will not fail, none of us will. We are humans, we do not know how to give up." Smiled. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." The next morning, the fleet launched. 3,000 warships emerged from hiding places across the solar system, forming up in the largest military formation in human history. At the head of the fleet flew Admiral's flagship, the Eternal Hope. Behind her came wave after wave of carriers, battleships, and destroyers, and scattered throughout the formation, invisible among the larger ships, flew the 12,000 volunteer vessels that would strike the final blow. "All ships, this is Admiral," announced over the fleet-wide channel. "We are about to do something that has never been done before. We are going to save people who hate us, people who rejected us, people who called us children and animals and treated us like nothing." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Some of you have asked me why. Why should we risk our lives for them? Why should we sacrifice everything for people who would not do the same for us? And I will tell you the answer. We do this because it is who we are. We do this because humanity has always risen to meet challenges that seemed impossible. We do this because giving up is not in our nature. The swarm thinks they cannot be stopped. The council thinks they are doomed, but they have never faced humans before. They do not know what we are capable of. Today, we will show them. Today, we will remind the universe why humanity survives. Today, we will win." The fleet entered faster-than-light travel, leaving Earth behind. They would emerge in the heart of Council space in 7 hours. The enemy was waiting. The Council was dying. And humanity was coming to save them all. In the silence of her quarters, Captain Shin recorded one final message. It was addressed to no one in particular, just to whoever might find it after she was gone. "My name is Shin," she said. "I am a pilot in the Earth Defense Fleet. When you see this, I will be dead. I want you to know that I was not afraid. I want you to know that I did not regret my choice. I want you to know that I was proud to be human, proud to serve, proud to give my life for people I never met." She paused, looking at the camera with steady eyes. "Remember us. Remember what we did. And never forget that humanity does not abandon those in need. Never." She ended the recording and closed her eyes. In a few hours she would die. But she would die as a human, doing what humans had always done. Standing against the darkness, no matter the cost. The last defenders of the Galactic Council had gathered at a place they called Final Light. It was a star system at the edge of surviving Council territory, chosen because it had no planets worth saving, and because the combined fleet could retreat no further. Behind them lay the remaining of the elder species. Ahead of them lay the swarm. Representative of the hegemony stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching her tactical display fill with red dots. The swarm was coming. Millions of creatures, each one a living weapon, each one hungry for destruction. Her fleet had 7,000 ships remaining from an original force of 40,000. They would fight. They would die. And then the swarm would consume everything that the elder species had built over 100,000 years of civilization. "How long until they arrive?" she asked her tactical officer. 6 hours, Representative, maybe less. Nodded slowly. She had already said goodbye to her family through long-range communication. Her eggs had been hidden on a distant colony, too small for the swarm to notice. Perhaps her children would survive. Perhaps they would remember her. "Prepare all ships for final engagement," she ordered. "No retreat, no surrender. We will take as many of them with us as we can." The order went out to the fleet. 7,000 ships began their final preparations. Weapons were charged. Shields were raised. Pilots wrote last letters to loved ones they would never see again. And then something impossible happened. "Representative," the sensor officer shouted. "New contacts emerging from faster-than-light travel, directly behind us." Felt her heart stop. Had the swarm somehow circled around them? Were they already trapped? "How many contacts?" she demanded. The sensor officer stared at his screen, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Over 3,000, and they are not swarm. The signatures are different, smaller, more organized." A communication signal cut through the chaos of the bridge. A human voice, speaking in perfectly translated language. "This is Admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have come to assist. Please do not fire on our vessels." Stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Humans, the species they had rejected, the children they had quarantined and dismissed. They had come with 3,000 ships, more than half the size of the combined Council fleet. "This is a trick," someone muttered. "It must be a trick." "It is not a trick," said quietly. She was looking at her tactical display, watching the human ships form up alongside the Council fleet. They were taking position on the front lines, putting themselves between the swarm and the species that had scorned them. Admiral's voice came again. "Representative, I know you have no reason to trust us. I know what the Council did to my people, but right now none of that matters. The swarm is coming and we have a chance to stop them. A real chance. Will you fight beside us?" Found herself laughing, a sound of pure disbelief. "You came to save us, after everything we did." "We came to save everyone," replied. "That includes you. Now please, we do not have much time. I need your fleet to follow my tactical instructions precisely. What we are about to do has never been attempted before." The next 5 hours were a blur of activity. Human officers boarded Council flagships to coordinate strategy. Council captains learned about weapons they had never imagined. And slowly, the two fleets merged into a single fighting force. Lieutenant sat at her sensor station aboard the carrier Infinite Hope, watching the swarm approach. She had never seen anything so terrifying. The creatures were visible now without magnification, a living wall of flesh and darkness that seemed to stretch forever. "They are beautiful," said Park, the weapons officer beside her, "in a horrible way." "They adapt to everything," replied. "Energy weapons, kinetics, biological agents. The Council has tried everything. Nothing works for more than a few hours." Smiled, and there was something dark in that smile. "They have never faced human weapons. They adapt to technology. They cannot adapt to madness." The Battle of Last Light began at exactly 1400 hours Earth time. The swarm attacked first, sending wave after wave of creatures toward the combined fleet. Council ships opened fire with plasma beams and particle cannons, destroying thousands of enemies. But the swarm adapted quickly. Within an hour, their outer shells had hardened to resist energy weapons. The plasma beams that had been so effective now bounced away harmlessly. "Phase 2, Admiral ordered calmly. Kinetic barrage." The human ships launched solid projectiles at incredible speeds, chunks of metal designed to tear through anything in their path. The swarm creatures exploded under the impacts, unable to adapt fast enough. But they learned. Within 2 hours, they had developed a kind of liquid armor that absorbed kinetic impacts. Phase 3, gravitational weapons. Now the real battle began. Human ships deployed the gravity bombs that Doctor had developed. Each bomb created a miniature black hole that lasted for only a few seconds, but in those seconds, it crushed everything within its range into a point of infinite density. Swarm creatures by the thousands vanished into nothingness, compressed so completely that not even atoms remained. The swarm tried to adapt. They spread out their formations, trying to minimize the damage from each bomb, but humans had planned for this too. As the swarm spread thin, the volunteer ships moved in. Captain Shin flew the Defiant through a gap in the swarm formation, her hands steady on the controls. All around her, she could see the enemy, millions of creatures that wanted to consume everything she loved. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange peace. "All volunteer units, this is Admiral," came the voice on her radio. "We have identified the primary hive clusters. These are the command nodes that coordinate swarm behavior. Destroy them and the swarm will be crippled. Good luck and thank you." Found her target, a massive cluster of swarm creatures that pulsed with dark energy. It was the size of a small moon, and it was directing the attacks of millions of lesser creatures. If she could destroy it, the tide of battle would turn. She accelerated toward it, ignoring the warning alarms that screamed at her. Swarm creatures tried to intercept her, but she was too fast. She twisted and rolled through their ranks, getting closer and closer to her target. "For humanity," she whispered. She pressed the detonation button. The antimatter core exploded, releasing more energy than 1,000 nuclear bombs. The hive cluster was vaporized instantly. So was, and her ship. So were the hundreds of thousands of swarm creatures that had been nearby. All across the battlefield, volunteer pilots repeated her sacrifice. One by one, they flew into the heart of the enemy and gave their lives to protect everyone else. 12,000 volunteers, 12,000 explosions, 12,000 heroes who would never be forgotten. The swarm wavered. Without their command nodes, the creatures became confused, attacking randomly instead of strategically. The combined fleet pressed its advantage, pouring fire into the disorganized enemy. "They are breaking," shouted from her bridge. "The swarm is breaking." The battle raged for 11 more days. Humanity lost 800 ships and 12,000 souls. The Council lost another 2,000 vessels. But when the final swarm queen was cornered and destroyed by Admiral's personal task force, the ancient enemy was broken forever. Lieutenant watched the last queen die on her sensor screen. The massive creature had been the heart of the entire swarm, the original being from which all others had spawned. When it died, the remaining swarm creatures simply stopped moving. Their purpose was gone. They drifted through space like dead leaves, waiting to be collected and destroyed. "We won," said her voice cracking. "We actually won." Park put his hand on her shoulder. "Of course we did. We are human. We do not know how to lose." Across the battlefield, cheers erupted from every ship. Council species who had never met a human before were weeping with relief. Sat on her bridge, staring at nothing, unable to believe that she was still alive. And somewhere in the debris, the final message from Captain Shin was recovered from her ship's recorder. It was transmitted to every vessel in the fleet, human and council alike. "Remember us, remember what we did, and never forget that humanity does not abandon those in need. Never." Nobody who heard those words would ever forget them. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Last Light. The galaxy was slowly healing. Destroyed worlds were being rebuilt. Refugees were returning to their homes, and the Galactic Council was preparing to hold its first formal session since the war. The Great Hall looked different now. Many of the original 12 seats were empty, their species too devastated to participate. They had lost there and were living as refugees on colonies. The Prism Collective had been reduced to a fraction of their former numbers. High Chancellor Mora was dead, killed when his flagship was overrun during the early days of the invasion. But new seats had been added, seats for the species that had risen during the crisis, seats for heroes. And at the center of the chamber, where once humans had stood as rejected petitioners, a place of honor had been prepared. Ambassador Park walked into the great hall with her head held high. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. Behind her came Admiral, the hero of Last Light, wearing his dress uniform and the medals of a grateful galaxy. The chamber fell silent as they approached. Representative, now serving as acting chancellor of the council, rose from her seat. Her scales were from battles fought and survived, and she moved with the careful slowness of someone who had seen too much. Ambassador Park, she said formally, Admiral, the Galactic Council welcomes you. Bowed slightly. Thank you, Chancellor. It is good to be here under better circumstances. A murmur ran through the chamber. Everyone remembered the last time humans had stood in this hall. Everyone remembered the rejection, the arrogance, the cruelty. Continued speaking, her voice heavy with emotion. 1 year ago, the Devourer swarm returned. They destroyed 47 worlds. They killed billions of our people. They nearly ended everything we had built over 100,000 years. She paused. And then you came. She stepped down from her high seat and walked toward, and until she stood directly before them. You came after we rejected you. You came after we quarantined your species and called you children and treated you as lesser beings. You came with 3,000 ships that we did not know you possessed, and you fought beside us when you had every reason to watch us burn. Lowered herself to her knees. It was a gesture of absolute submission among her people, something that had not been done in public for thousands of years. I ask for your forgiveness, she said. On behalf of the Council, on behalf of every species that ever doubted you, I ask for your forgiveness. The chamber was completely silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how humanity would respond. Looked at the kneeling Chancellor for a long moment. Then she reached down and took his hand, gently pulling her back to her feet. Rise, Chancellor, said softly. We did not come here for apologies. We did not save you so that you would kneel before us. We came because it was the right thing to do, and we ask nothing in return except what we asked for 2 years ago: partnership, trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. Nothing more. Stared at her in disbelief. You want nothing, no compensation for your losses, no punishment for those who wronged you, no power. Admiral stepped forward. We lost 800 ships and 12,000 soldiers in the war. Good people who died protecting strangers. If we took power over you, if we demanded tribute, if we forced you to bow to us, we would dishonor their sacrifice. They did not die to build a human empire. They died to save lives. A young Prism Collective delegate spoke from the upper seats. But why? Why would you sacrifice so much for people who treated you so poorly? I do not understand. Smiled, though there was old pain in that smile. Because that is who we are. Humans have always fought for those who could not fight for themselves. It is not about what people deserve. It is about what is right. The swarm did not care if you were young or old, powerful or weak, cruel or kind. They would have consumed you all, and we could not stand by and watch. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. Chancellor called us children once. Maybe she was right. Maybe we are young, but children grow up. They learn. They become strong. And sometimes the youngest child is the one who saves the family when everyone else has given up. Continued speaking. We are offering you a choice. You can give us a seat on this council as equals and we will work together to build a better galaxy. Or you can reject us again and we will return to our 17 worlds and wait another 1,000 years. She shrugged. It makes no difference to us. We know who we are. The question is, do you know who you want to be? The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 40,000 years, a new species was granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Not because they had ancient history or vast fleets or countless worlds, but because they had proven something more important. They had proven their character. As the session ended and delegates began to leave, Lieutenant approached Ambassador. Had been honored as a hero of the war, the first human to detect the returning swarm, but she still felt uncomfortable in formal settings. Ambassador, she said, may I ask you something? Smiled, of course, Lieutenant, you have earned that right. When you first came to this hall before the war, did you truly believe that we would ever be accepted? Did you believe that they would change? considered the question carefully. "No," she admitted. "I did not believe they would change on their own. They were too proud, too set in their ways, but I believed that something would happen to force them to see us differently. I did not know it would be the swarm. I did not know it would cost so many lives, but I knew that eventually the universe would give us a chance to prove ourselves. And if the swarm had never returned, then we would have found another way." Looked at the young lieutenant with warm eyes. "Humanity has always found a way. That is our greatest strength, not our ships or our weapons or our numbers, our determination, our refusal to accept defeat, our ability to keep going when everyone else has given up." She placed a hand on shoulder. "You detected the swarm when no one else was watching. You sent the warning that gave us time to prepare. Because of you, we had 7 hours of extra preparation time. That 7 hours might have made the difference between victory and defeat. Never underestimate the importance of one person doing their duty, even when it seems pointless." Felt tears forming in her eyes. "I just watched sensors in an empty station. I did not fight. I did not sacrifice anything. You stayed at your post. You did your job, and when the moment came, you were ready," smiled. "That is heroism, Lieutenant. Not every hero carries a weapon." As and walked from the chamber, they passed the memorial that had been erected in the center of the hall. It was a simple structure, a pillar of white stone bearing 12,000 names, the names of every human who had given their life in the war. At the top of the pillar, carved in letters that would last forever, were the words from Captain Shin's final message. "Remember us, remember what we did, and never forget that humanity does not abandon those in need. Never." Stopped before the memorial and saluted. "We did it," he said quietly. "We saved them, and we did it without becoming like them." Nodded. That was always the test. Not whether we could win, but whether we could win without losing ourselves. Power corrupts most species. It makes them forget where they came from, but we remembered. We chose compassion over revenge, partnership over domination. And because of that choice, the galaxy has a future. She looked up at the names on the pillar. They died so that others might live. There is no greater sacrifice. And as long as humans remember their names, they are not truly gone. Outside the great hall, the stars burned cold and bright. The swarm was gone. The council was rebuilding. And humanity had taken its place among the elder species, not as conquerors or rulers, but as partners and protectors. The galaxy had underestimated them. The council had dismissed them. Everyone had expected them to fail. But they were human. And humans never gave up. Not ever,